Hi, my name is Gabrielle Moore, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm the Arts Engagement Associate here at Seattle Rep. I am joined today with AJ Muse, a local scholar and community educator. Right now at the Rep, we're premiering a brand new play, Mr. Dickens and His Carol. While this is a beautiful fictional imagining of how Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol, AJ is here to give us the hard historical facts about how certain winter holidays are significant to the Black community and their family traditions. During this conversation, AJ and I will be enjoying the Seattle Rep's signatures cocktails and mocktails for this show. I have the Bah Humbug, a eggnog drink with whipped cream and cinnamon, and AJ is enjoying a Taste of Winter, a peppermint martini. You can buy both of these delicious drinks at the Rotunda Bar. And right now we're in front of our lobby's Christmas tree, where patrons have been writing their own family traditions on these little ornaments. All right. Before we dive into our conversation, AJ, will you please introduce yourself, your work, and your interest?
Absolutely. My name is AJ Muse. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a community educator here in Seattle, Washington. In general, I just like to call myself a historical scavenger hunter. I like looking for aspects of history that maybe we didn't get the whole picture in school, or maybe it was told to us in a way that leaves some stuff out. So it's really fun to look at the ways that Black folks have given to this country, and also the ways that traditions that were present during the days of enslavement kind of follow us into today.
Thank you so much, AJ. So with Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday only in 2021, more people are being exposed to the significant dates for the Black community. But can you share about how New Year's Day is also very significant to people who were enslaved, their religious rights, and the Emancipation Proclamation?
Absolutely. So sometimes in school, when we're taught history, and this is not to be a dig at teachers do a really excellent job with the resources that they're given, but also teachers can only go so far. So first and foremost, this is a pro-teacher conversation. But with that being said, I know I can remember in high school being taught that the Emancipation Proclamation freed enslaved people, but that wasn't exactly the case. The Emancipation Proclamation was a military tactic that Abraham Lincoln pursued because the Civil War was not exactly going the way that he thought it was going to go. So when we're talking about emancipation, I know the language is very particular, but it did not exactly free enslaved folks. So essentially what it said is you as a Black person, if you were in a Confederate-controlled area, you needed to get yourself into a Union-controlled area. But with Juneteenth, there were a lot of Black folks who, even after the end of the Civil War in April of 1865, did not know that they were free from either from the Emancipation Proclamation or from the end of the Civil War. And so we get Juneteenth from General Gordon Granger going into Galveston, Texas, and essentially reading General Order Number 5, which had language around it that was similar to the Emancipation Proclamation. And I think sometimes that's where some of the confusion might come from. But Juneteenth was a very emancipating, freeing day, but New Year's, it doesn't get looked at in the same way. During the days of enslavement, New Year's Day was sometimes called Hiring Day or Heartbreak Day, because at the end of the year, the people who held enslaved people in bondage would need to settle their debts, right? So it's like at the end of the year, it's almost like balancing your checkbook for those of us who have parents and grandparents who still use checkbooks, right? You kind of look at what you spent, how much stuff you needed to buy, all of that stuff, and kind of get your affairs in order. One of the most this is fun. One of the most profitable pieces of property that a person had during that time, if you were an enslaver, was the Black people that you held in bondage. And so you would kind of look around at the human cargo, human property you had, and you kind of weighed who was going to help you settle your debts. And so for a lot of Black families who were held in bondage, Heartbreak Day or Hiring Day was around the period in between Christmas and New Year's Day, where at any given point, a member of your family could be taken from you and sold off. And it was very difficult to find out where your family members were sold. So that was probably the last time you saw a member of your family.
Wow, that's terrible to hear. But important to know, of course. And so when Emancipation Proclamation, a lot of people you're saying did not hear yet, when was it officially spread throughout this country?
Yeah, so Lincoln reads the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. That's kind of when it goes into effect. And so a lot of enslaved people in the South would hear this announcement because it was either put in newspapers and the folks who could read would be able to read it out loud. A lot of enslavers had to release their enslaved folks, but a lot of Black folks escaped on their own and essentially found Union soldiers who were kind of in that area and joined up camp with them. But for Juneteenth, he had to go down. So Juneteenth, we get the name from June 19th, right, when General Gordon Granger went in and kind of told folks in Texas. So I would say the Civil War ended about April of 1865. By June, I would say, of 1865, most of all Black folks knew that they were free. There are instances of people being in such rural areas of the South that they did not realize that they were able legally to leave the plantation until the 1960s. So it really does depend on where you live and your access to information and your access to education.
Wow, that's so interesting. Could you talk more about Watch Night and that historical event?
Yeah, so Watch Night is usually the kind of church service that happens around the Emancipation Proclamation anniversary, so around the New Year's Eve to New Year's Day. That evening, a lot of enslaved folks would go and they would have worship services to try and pray for good health, pray for good faith, pray to be able to keep their families together for as long as possible. And you're kind of hopeful and watching, trying to figure out what's going to happen, what's coming ahead, being as vigilant as you possibly could be. But there's only so much that you can do in that position. You don't have a lot of power to keep your family together. So a lot of those times during Heartbreak Day, Watch Night, you kind of are trying to keep your family as close together as possible. But a lot of people were unfortunately spending their last evenings with their family members.
And can you talk more about the significance of it being a celebration and a church service, especially during a time when they were not allowed to practice their own religious beliefs and ideologies?
Yeah. That's a great question. So the church, I want to be very careful because this is not supposed to be a dig on religion, but we can at least say, based off of a lot of evidence and historical context, that the church in the Bible was used in really horrible ways during the days of enslavement. If folks are curious, the Smithsonian magazine did a really awesome article on the slave Bible, which takes out very specific chapters of the Bible. So the Bible was used as a tool for control for folks. But what we also have to remember is a lot of enslaved folks are descendants of enslaved Africans, and enslaved Africans came with their own practices and traditions, and some of those have been kind of mixed into the different religious practices that are kind of present throughout the Black diaspora. Maybe not as robust as areas like South America or even just parts of West Africa, East Africa, the whole of the continent really, but there are traditions that kept up, and so a lot of times being prayerful, being watchful, being showing reverence to the people who protect you, whether it's the ancestors, whether it's specific deities, whether it's specific gods. It really just depends on the tradition. That was then removed and stripped away from the folks, and then they were given Christianity as a form of control. And if you look at the ideology of the lost cause, which is kind of the school of thought that helps the South kind of process what happened during the Civil War, there is this idea that a divine providence is the reason why Black people are the particular group of people that are enslaved. And so Watch Night a lot of times was the ability for folks to be able to practice what they wanted to practice in secret, but also in the plain view of folks. So if your owner goes to church service on New Year's Eve, a lot of times if you were an enslaved domestic, you needed to go with the person that enslaved you. And so if you have a bunch of other domestic enslaved folks, you kind of figure out how to have your own kind of church service while waiting for somebody else. But there were also, some enslavers who allowed, use that term very loosely, Black folks to practice their own religion as long as it was kind of attached to Christianity. Anything that was not attached to Christianity was seen as, the devil or pagan or all of that, which then justified Black people being put into, subjugation. So it gets slippery in there, but yeah, Watch Night now becomes the opportunity for church families to celebrate the good wealth and prosperity that they've had, and to also, mourn any losses that they've had and kind of get ready to start the new year fresh.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That
Absolutely.
was so much amazing history at once, and I just want to keep digging into it. That's
Absolutely.
amazing. And then with each celebration, I mean, food is such an important touchstone in every culture,
Absolutely.
and it comes with so much significance. Can you talk about maybe the dishes and the meals that would come with a celebration? That
Yeah,
happened in New
yeah.
Zealand?
So a lot of these traditions, again, it depends on your family. It depends on how much your family was able to retain from the days of enslavement, because again, a lot of Black folks before the end of the Civil War were not allowed to learn how to read and write. And so a lot of these were passed down just like oral stories, or if you were lucky enough to be able to stay with your parents, you kind of learned, in the same way that like, I don't know exactly how I know how to cook certain traditional foods, but like I know how to do it because my mom was always have me in the kitchen. It's a similar way. So for example, on New Year's Eve, I know for like my family, so sorry, I just realized I touched the mic. It was in my head. So I know for some of my friends, they always have a pot of black-eyed peas to eat on New Year's Day, because black-eyed peas represent prosperity. They represent money, right? During the days of enslavement, it was said that you needed to eat one for each day of the year, so like 365. Some folks even put pennies in the pot of black-eyed peas, and whoever got the penny, was the lucky one. There's food like cornbread, which a lot of Black families have during holidays. Cornbread represents gold, so again, represents wealth, prosperity. Some families even put actual corn kernels in there to represent gold nuggets, to add more wealth to you. And then there's collard greens, again, the color of money, wealth, prosperity, good luck. It depends on also what part of the South your family comes from. And a lot of these are tied to wealth and prosperity, because that was the thing that Black folks did not have during the days of enslavement, right? It was almost impossible to save up the amount of money necessary, not just for your own freedom, but like to purchase your family. If you're getting paid maybe $1 a week and it costs $800 to free yourself, like it's almost impossible for you to save up enough money to, free your family. So a lot of these traditions want to foster the ability for you to free your family so that you can have your own autonomy and continue to build these traditions. But those are some food traditions that are almost always present at different tables, at least all the tables I've ever been to for the holidays.
Yeah, thank you so much, because you really inspired me to think about my own family and our traditions. On Christmas Day, we're very much a ham and mashed potatoes, but Christmas Eve, it's the tamales, it's the menudo, it's flan, and I just, I'm so used to this is what I do every year. I never stop and think about why. And so you really inspired me to look into it, and I found that tamales really represent the time that Mary and Joseph had to search for shelter so that she could give birth, and I just thought that was so interesting.
It's fascinating how family traditions you're just like, oh, we just do this. But there's usually, like, I really encourage a lot of folks, if you have random traditions or like you always do this thing on the holidays, I really encourage you to talk to the elders in your family, because a lot of times they might not even realize it's a tradition. They're just like, oh, we just always do this on this day. But it's pretty fascinating how there's like really amazing stories tied to those traditions.
I know, and it's a beautiful way to bring everyone together and just like appreciate the ancestors that we won't have a physical connection with, but that spiritual and mental connection can travel down every generation.
Absolutely. And we also are, we are the makeup of our ancestors. I know there's certain things that I do that my mom would look at me and she'd be like, my grandma used to do that. Or I'll do something and she'll be like, my dad used to do that. And it's like, okay, I guess grandpa wants you to know something, So I would definitely encourage folks to be as curious as they can be about family traditions, because there's some really amazing stories that tend to be tied, and stories of like survival and resilience. The story of Mary and Joseph is a story of resilience, but also I bet you that ties into your own family story of resilience in some ways too. So I know that's going to be really fun for you to like figure out.
I know, I'm going to definitely dive in more when I go home for the holidays and call up my grandma and just be like, I need to know more. Thank you so much for telling me more about that. And so with all the trials and triumphs of this past year, what do you want people to know about being a good neighbor during this time of holiday cheer and spirit and the sense of annual renewal that's coming up?
Whew. I didn't realize I was going to get an existential question. Being a good neighbor, I would say lead with curiosity, right? I think we are in an age where it's really easy to look at differences as a way to shun people. But a lot of times, just like different family traditions, I may do things one way, you may do things a different way, but the kind of core of it is the same. It's a way to celebrate our traditions. It's a way to celebrate our family. It's a way to celebrate those that came before us and also honor those that are going to come after us. So I would say be curious. We are going to be, not even going to be, we are in a really kind of drastic time right now. And it's going to require us to be a little kinder, to have a little more patience, especially for folks who are service workers. As much as possible, the folks who allow your life to kind of move in a sense of normalcy are the ones that require and should receive the most amount of grace. So be curious and be kind. That's what I'm hoping for in the new year, because we got a lot coming our way, and the better we are able to stick together within our differences, I think the better off we'll be. So, and also be kind to yourself over the holidays. Like the holidays, the whole point of it is to eat and drink a bunch of sugary beverages and cookies and cake and candy. So the kindness should also extend to yourself as much as possible as you are able to extend it to others.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. I know we don't often think about taking care of, the number one sometimes.
Yeah. As much as you want to be kind to others, I really hope that we can be kind to ourselves too.
You have to put on your own airplane mask before you can put it on.
That is a brilliant metaphor. Yes. Make sure you can breathe before your neighbor, otherwise you and your neighbor are going to be out for sure.
Well, AJ, thank you so much for joining us in this conversation.
Absolutely.
I learned so much. It's a pleasure having you here.
It was so much fun.
I just think you're the best person and scholar.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And so where can we support your work and your podcast and everything else you have going on?
That is a great question. All of my social media handles are AJ and the Beanies, because I'm always in beanies. So just come check me out there. I'm working on a new show, so once we get that all figured out, we'll get that information out to folks. But my old show was called Battle Fatigue. If you want to check that out, there's like 40-something episodes before I realized that I needed to take a break and live life. But yeah, if you want to check me out, all my socials are at AJ and the Beanies.
Awesome. Thank you so much, AJ.
Absolutely. This was epic.
Cheers. Happy holidays, everyone.